Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. We have an interesting and somewhat unusual show for Reference Point today because we're going to be talking about 2020. This is the beginning of 2018. We're going to be looking a couple of years into the future. And today I have the privilege of having with me a gentleman who's my guest who is actually planning on running for the presidential election in the year 2020, and that's Mr. Ruben Valles Jr. Ruben, welcome to Reference Point.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
I'm real glad that you're here, and I think this is something that, this is a topic that I think is important for people to be talking about at multiple levels. And one level is the fact that we have seen over the last several elections surprises relative to who might be running for office and all that sort of thing.
Right.
We had, was it Mr. Carson in last year who was he's a doctor. Okay, what does he know? I heard on the saw it on the web today. Somebody was saying, "Oh, Oprah Winfrey ought to run for president." So there's all kinds of things. But the fact of the matter is, you have the intention. You are actually in the process of running for president of the United States in the year 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, you are completely correct on that. Yeah, it's definitely a hard step to take, and it's a big decision, obviously. And yeah, definitely, it's a huge goal of mine.
And what prompted you to make a decision like that? Because that's a pretty significant decision.
Yeah. What prompted me was it's a combination of things, really. Everything from when I was a kid up to the most recent elections, with Trump becoming the U.S. president, and seeing both parties so divided, and seeing the American people continuously being gutted, far left and far right. Mm-hmm. We need to change. We're a progressive nation, and we're growing up in a time where we have more progressive thinking,
right?
And that's how we need to start approaching our national and international issues.
One of the things that sort of like the everybody knows kind of groupthink thing is that, oh man, if you're not running as the Democrat that everybody is throwing money at, or the Republican that everybody is throwing money at, then there's like no chance. Mm-hmm. How do you address something like that? I mean, it's sort of like the concept is that there's this ingrained activity and process in our electoral mechanism, right, that makes it extremely difficult for someone who has not grown up as a Democrat or grown up as a Republican, to be able to break through. How do you approach something like that?
Well, one, you got to look at the Constitution. Our forefathers were very smart at creating our Constitution and really stipulating what requirements need to be met in order to run for the U.S. president. And there's only 3 requirements per the Constitution. One is to be a born natural citizen of the U.S., live on the U.S. soil for 14 years, and then also be at the age of 35. 35? Yes.
Okay.
So with those considered, it's open for anybody to run. And I think the reason behind that is because you have to have forward movement and, again, your progress as a nation. Mm-hmm. And you can't find yourself becoming stale in your ideals and how you approach our issues as a people and as a nation, and how we approach everything internationally as well. So it definitely opens up the field to different perspectives and disciplines to help try to guide the country in the right direction.
Got it. I want to get into talking about some of your viewpoints on things, but before we get there, I just want to let the people know we're going to get there. One of the things that you and I had talked about when we had coffee a few weeks back was the fact that your observation that a high percentage of representatives in the United States Congress and in the Senate have been there for an extremely long time. That it's as if they have, and it's not one of those things you get elected for life. That doesn't happen here in this country. But it seems like that seems to be what's happening. Has it always been that way?
Yeah, it's been that way for quite a while. But within just this past election for the 114th Congress, within just this past election for that, we've actually had a higher percentage of older-aged representatives and Congress members, senators, staying within office. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a representative, the minimum requirement to actually run as a representative is 25 years old.
25, okay.
25. And as a senator, you're looking at 30. So there's a 5-year difference there. The huge difference, though, between those 2 roles is as a representative, you get 2-year terms unlimited times you can get reelected in.
Right.
As a senator, you get unlimited amount of times you can get elected, but it's 6-year terms.
Right.
Yeah. And so you figure in those 6 years, you think after a while they would want to foster in the next generation of leaders. But what happens is they get so used to staying within that seat, they just get elected over and over and over.
Yeah, but isn't part of that, one would think that hopefully the reason that you get reelected over and over again is that you are really doing the things for your constituency that help to move your area of your congressional district or your state forward. Okay.
Right.
I'm not convinced that that's what happens, though. I think you get there and it's like, oh, well, hey, you know, it's hard to unseat an incumbent, and why that is just because everybody knows who they are, as opposed to whoever the new person coming in is. So how do we deal with that sort of thing? If you were president, what would you do?
For one, it definitely comes down to the collaboration between everybody and the older generations realizing that the times we are growing up in now are a lot more progressive in the way we think and the way we function. We're so much more interconnected now, culturally, socially, technologically. It's not very hard to easily reach out across the U.S. or across the nation, across international borders and everything like that. It's so much easier to connect. So the reason why we want the younger generation in there is because they're going to help with that progressive thinking, and the way we try to reach them is to find a way to appeal to them, to make politics more entertaining. Because obviously when you read a newspaper, you read it because it's entertaining, it entertains you, and it gives you information at the same time. Our politics need to follow suit. It needs to be represented in a way, presented to the people in a way to where it makes sense to them. And it does seem like the verbiage and, you know, the words going to get drowned out with, you know, very complicated words that, you know, not a lot of people may understand.
Right.
So,
well, that seems to be typical in a lot of arenas, in politics, in medicine, in business, in, you know, a lot of things where terminology is created that is deliberately difficult to understand, because then the people, after a while, they say, oh, screw it, and don't worry about it. I want to talk for a couple minutes, Ruben, if I can, about you. Okay. So tell us about yourself. You're a California boy. You were born in California, right?
Born and raised Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, okay. And tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, as I mentioned, I was born here in Silicon Valley, so I seen the .com boom. I remember when .netcom came around, and obviously we had like dial-up modems, and now we have DSL and, you know, fiber optic cables. And so growing up in the Bay Area, I definitely got to see a lot of changes. On top of that, as far as my personal life goes and everything I've learned morally and experienced, when I was very young, went through a traumatic time where I was actually on the 911 show. The 911 show, if you recall that, Rescue 911.
Yeah.
So we actually, myself and my mom, we had a direct, indirect impact on how San Jose PD and their dispatchers work. It's because of the 911 call my mother made. They actually started using that to train their dispatchers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's we definitely had an indirect impact on how San Jose PD operates, and as far as, you know, communicating with their dispatchers and how dispatchers need to communicate with their police officers.
Got it. Okay.
From that point, I've also been involved like JROTC programs during junior high and high school.
Okay.
I also was involved with the Sheriff Youth Cadet Program, which is, I helped create the program. I was the first Sheriff Youth Cadet captain.
Is that in Santa Clara County?
Yeah, Santa Clara County, yeah. And from there, after high school, I ended up going into the military. Served almost 4 years in the Marine Corps.
Oh, thank you for your service.
Yeah, no problem, anytime.
4 years in the Marine Corps. And what were the years of that?
That was actually from 2003 to 2006.
2003 to 2006?
Yeah.
Okay, and you were stationed where?
Over in San Bruno, which is the 23rd Marines.
Yeah.
It's a reserve unit.
Okay.
Went in as a reservist, and I was only a reservist for maybe 9 months, just under a year. And we ended up having a truck company get put together, was going out to support 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines out of 29 Palms.
Oh, okay.
And so I volunteered for that to get the experience to be deployed out and, you know, see what it was like.
And did you get deployed out?
Yes, I did. It was Ramadi, Iraq.
Ramadi?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That was a hot spot, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Especially for the year we went out. We went out from 05 to 06. So it was during the year of elections.
Oh.
So we got to see a lot happen.
They were supposed to dip their finger in the purple paint or something?
Yeah, it depends on what province they were part of. They'd either have blue ink, purple ink, and stuff, and that would help to prevent voter fraud.
Got it.
So it was definitely an eye-opener because you see people trying to bring democracy over into their nation and understand the values of the democracy, and they do so by putting their life on the line.
Yeah.
Because you would have insurgent groups that would actually watch these families and look for that dye on their thumb. And if they seen that, they know they were partaking. And a lot of these families would have children, fathers kidnapped, and have their entire families threatened with death if they were to actually partake in these votes.
Wow.
And regardless of what death threats they got, they would come out and do it. Yeah.
I know. I think we have a couple of still shots, pictures of you as a Marine there in Ramadi. I'm going to have the guys bring those up while we talk about that a little bit more. So you were there for how long? How long was your stay in country there? In country,
it was just under a year, so we were at about a 6-8 month rotation.
Okay. And your work there was involved with, you mentioned vehicle transfer.
Yeah.
So you were driving the trucks and stuff?
Yeah, I was driving the 7-ton trucks, the Humvees. That was my primary job out there. But when you're out there, you tend to kind of do the whole 9 yards.
Right.
You do everything. And when I was out there, my whole idea was that I'm not out there just to do my job, to just drive my troops, supplies, or anything of that sort. It's also to go out there and get boots on ground and actually partake in our missions. So I'd volunteer for overwatches, security patrols, stuff like that.
Got it. And did you have any incidents while you were there?
There was a few. Yeah, there was a few. I don't really want to talk about too much. But yeah, there's a few incidences. It's
one of the things that I think is very interesting about that is the fact that you have served and you have seen action and you were in a scenario like that. And as I think back over the last several presidents who have served in that office, I think George Bush Sr. served in Nam, if I'm not mistaken. He was a pilot in Vietnam. But I don't know that anybody after that. I don't know that Mr. Clinton was. I don't know that Mr. Obama was. I don't know that Mr. Trump was. Served in the military. But when you go back further from that, you go back 30, 60, 100 years. You had John F. Kennedy. You had Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah. So it's like many of the men who have served in that office had that experience.
Yes.
Do you consider that important?
Yes, I do. Yes, definitely. Because as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and ultimately having a huge power to send your troops into foreign soil, I think that's a huge experience. And it's a huge benefit to how you're going to look at the situations in which you're going to have to send your troops out, regardless if it's actual sending physical troops, if it's sending out just aircraft carriers or kind of ships out to patrol the oceans, anything of that sort. So I definitely look at it as a required experience.
Got it. Okay. I want to let the folks who are watching know that if they have any questions for us here, for Ruben or myself here, anything about Reference Point, send us an email at info@referencepointtv.com and we'll get that over to him and he can answer your questions. So let's talk a little bit about if you're running for president, when you run for that office, you don't run by yourself. I mean, early on in the country's activities, it was when you had a candidate for president, you had a candidate for vice president, or whoever came in first won president, whoever came in second vice, and they changed all of that.
Yeah.
So now you're in a situation where it's like, okay, it's not just me anymore. I've got to have a running mate.
Yeah.
So how do you approach something like that from your perspective?
Well, you approach it with looking at the ethics and the virtues of your potential running mate. For me particularly, I want somebody who's going to be abreast on our politics, someone who's going to be intelligent and smart, and really has some forward thinking, and also have different expertise to pull on when it comes to talking about our immigration, our cybersecurity, sending our troops out, stuff of that sort. And when you have somebody who shares the ultimate end goal, but brings in different objectives or different strategies on how to reach those goals, that's where it becomes really important, and especially in a running mate. You want to be able to pull on different perspectives, because if you're both aiming for the same goal but have the same objectives and strategies and tactics, you're not really going to learn anything new there. You could possibly be bumping heads.
Got it.
So it's really important to have some kind of individual identity of your own.
It may be well too early for anything like that for you right now, but have you given thought to, obviously you've given thought to the characteristics.
Yes.
Have you given thought to any people that, you know, I'm not asking you to name names, but I'm going to ask you to answer the question. Have you given thought to any individuals that if you had your druthers, that's a person that you would like to have on with you?
Yeah, I've given it some thought. Yeah. I've definitely given it thought, and of course, there's going to have to be some more looking into, you know, the individuals and seeing if it would be a right match.
Of course. So, one of the things that I'm guessing that folks who are watching the show were thinking right from the beginning is this guy's joking. He's not really planning on doing this. I mean, come on, this is all just a... But you're serious about this.
Yeah, very serious. I'm already registered with the Federal Election Committee. So I did that approximately about a month to 2 months right after our elections, after Trump got elected. So it's just, no, I'm taking all the steps necessary, going out to the public, letting them know. Anytime I run across somebody and I overhear politics being discussed or something like that, I'll try to chime in without, you know, really trying to chime in too aggressively.
Right.
You know,
So how do you get on the ballot? I mean, how do you get on the ballot?
Well, it's for every state it's different. But if let's concentrate on California, for example. California, to have access to the presidential ballot, you need to at least have 1% of the registered voter population. And since 2016,
when you say 1% of the registered voter population, what do you mean?
There's a total of 18.2 million registered voters within the state of California.
Right.
So you need to at least have 1% of their signatures. So that's easily
signatures.
over.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
signatures.
you have to, like a petition that says, I want this guy on the ballot. Okay.
Yeah, and then you send that out to your state senator.
Oh, okay. And is the state senator obligated to act on it, or can they just put it in a drawer?
They're not necessarily obligated to act on it, but if the signatures are there, it should be done.
Okay.
But there's also other ways besides the signatures too. You can also do write-ins, and write-ins actually require a certain time limit. So within the general elections, you have to submit your candidacy and your write-in paperwork approximately about like 80 days before the general elections.
But for someone who's actually serious about doing this, I would think that may be a strategy in some of those smaller states that you didn't have a chance to get to, but maybe they've heard publicity about you. But for the major places, California, Texas, New York, Pennsylvania, you know, whatever, Florida, that you're going to want to actually be on the ballot, right?
Yes.
So how do you go about doing that? I mean, isn't that like, are you going to jump on a plane and be plane hopping to get all that stuff done, or how do you go about that process?
Well, ideally, it would be great to actually get out there and meet the people face to face.
Right.
Because I think anybody who's going to be running for president should definitely do that. It's about building the relations and the trust with you and between the people. But since we are in a time of technological advancements, it's so much easier to create a web page and, you know, actually create a video in which somebody from that state can just watch, just simply click over and watch. So reaching them is a lot easier than what it was, let's just say, 80 years ago.
Right.
You know, so you don't have to spend as much money either to go out and necessarily have to reach them out in person. You just have to do it through the given technology we have.
Eventually, you may need to be there because when you get to 2020 and the election is that year and you're going to do whatever, you're going to have to, you know, people are going to want to see you for real. But you should be able to, what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, is you should be able to do a lot of that groundwork to get to the point where you're on the ballot without necessarily having to put the miles.
Yes.
Put the work, but not necessarily the miles.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so I want to ask you something here. By the way, I want to let the folks at home know. I think we have maybe 8 minutes left in the show here. But this topic is so important. I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind coming back and sticking around for another taping so that we can get into some of these questions about positioning and stuff like that for you. Are you willing to do that?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. So I have a question for you right now, and that is that when you look at the general population in the country, to a large degree, we seem to have lost confidence in government. And when you look at the poll ratings and polls, I mean, the polls were wrong about the last election, so I don't know how good polls are. But when you look at the polls that talk about the opinions of Congress as a whole, the presidency as an institution, on and on and on, elected officials in general, it's kind of been on a serious downward trend. Why? That's a really good question. And I think the reason why it's been on a downward trend is because, again, people are losing that connection with the government and that the ability to rely on it faithfully, without feeling like something's going to be robbed of them. And so it's what they need to do is approach our situations nationally, internationally, in a way to where the people can relate and realize how it has a direct impact on them. So when we talk about relying on it, they feel like they can't rely on it. Does that mean, there's a couple of different layers potentially to that too. We have had a tendency in the last 30 years or so, 30, 40 years, to put programs in place that are social benefit programs that don't necessarily encourage individuals to find a job or start a new career or do whatever because they've had a problem and so what is it that they should be relying on the government for?
They should definitely be relying on the government for the support and for the open communication. I think that's huge. If you can't relate with your people and you can't provide a certain level of trust, then you're going to lose all that support.
Right.
So I definitely think with the government we need to rekindle that trust and that reliance upon each other.
So that's that sense of open government or telling people exactly what's going on. Obviously, there are certain things that you have to kind of keep under closed doors because we're not going to. There are certain things, but for the most part, there's the talk about open government and communication with the people and being honest about this, that, and the other thing, and not misdirection, all that kind of stuff that has tended to be going on in the last 20 or so years. How do you deal with? How would you correct that? What is it about you that changes that dynamic, that the people who are watching this show can say, I could trust this guy?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's my virtues and it's my character and the qualities I bring to the table, and the fact that when I tell you that I'm here to represent you and that I will communicate with you about the decisions being made on behalf of the people that are supposed to benefit them, I would hope that you get that sense that you can trust me and that I'm going to follow through with it. Being the fact that I'm a U.S. Marine, I took a sworn oath to defend this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As far as I'm concerned, we have plenty of domestic enemies we need to worry about in our own nation. Mm-hmm. And so since that sworn oath is there, I've taken that oath multiple times before. So in no way am I going to forget it. And compared to a lot of other, I don't want to put names out there, but people that step into politics as a career jump or as into just a way to give them the perks, the caveat of the holding that such position. It's a lot more than that.
And there's, some people might say, well, you're not in the Marines anymore, but I've heard it said that once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yeah, that's right.
And taking that oath, that oath was, it sounds to me from what you said, that oath was not just an oath for service in the Corps.
Right.
It was an oath of for you, it was beyond that. Okay, because there's a lot of men and women who have served and then they're out and they're doing whatever they're doing, and it's like, okay, cool, I was or in the Army and the Navy and all that sort of thing. But you've taken this thing to a whole other level in terms of the the commitment behind that oath, it seems to me.
Yes, and how I look at it is that that commitment, that oath, will not be null and void until I'm 6 feet in the ground. It's something I will uphold until the day I die.
Okay.
It's just, I hold it very dear to my heart, and it's something I will not give up on.
Cool. So I'm going to ask you why president rather than, say, senator or congressman?
Well, because, put it in without going to the real harsh term, is that things trickle downhill. And if I look at being a senator or just a Congress member, I can only affect immediately issues in those categories, in that area. Now, as president, that gives me a broader brush to stroke some of the issues we have and kind of go over things and have more of an effect and a say on how we can approach certain issues, and to make sure we have the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, regardless of what a party affiliation you're part of, to make sure that they collaborate together.
Got it. So what would make you an effective CEO, in essence?
One, it's my loyalty to the nation, loyalty to the people, my honesty, truthfulness. I will not go and lie and deceive the people in order to benefit myself. That's not what serving the people means. It means to actually be courageous, show humility, and sacrifice. And that's the other thing that's part of the oath, is that when you take an oath, again, when I served, and even when you take an oath of office, you are giving up you're sacrificing a certain part of your life that the average person can enjoy that you can't.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, we have slightly over a minute left in this show here, and I think I need to kind of wrap up and let the folks know that when we come back, Ruben said he's going to stick around and we're going to do this more. I want to talk about some of the key things that are on the minds of people in this last, over the last few years. Immigration is a big one, defense is a big one, education is a big one, jobs is a big one, the economy is a big one. There's a lot of big issues, okay? I want to talk about some of those things, if we may, when we come back for the next episode.
Yeah,
Is that
definitely.
okay?
Look forward to it.
Cool. So, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your being here. And Ruben, thank you for coming. And don't forget, if you have any issues or questions about what we're doing here, send us that query at info@referencepointtv.com. And come back for this next episode. We'll see you next time on Reference Point.